Welcome everybody to this Transpolitica Hangout on Air, where we are looking at the subject of can democracy be improved, and can governance be improved by taking advantage of technology. Technology changes so many other things. It's reaching into lots of aspects of our lives, lots of aspects of our business, lots of aspects of our entertainment, education, healthcare. Can it improve how we govern ourselves? In a moment, I'll be introducing a panel of speakers who have each got experience in aspects of politics and aspects of society. They'll all talk about what they're doing. My name's David Wood. I'm the Executive Director of Transpolitica. And as I said, we're going to be in discussion with a number of panelists on this subject of better political decision-making via better technology. One thing we should start off by figuring out is, well, what are the possible areas of improvement? What are the requirements for better political decision making? And I have provisionally listed 8 things here, although the panelists may have different ideas. But here's what it seems to me reasonable that we might think technology could help with. First of all, fact-checking all the statements that are made by politicians as they seek our votes. Often it would be very useful to know, gosh, that's interesting, is it really true? This seems to contradict what I've held elsewhere. How can I be sure? More generally, there's so much information around. And in a sense, problem isn't so much that we're drowning in information. The problem is that we don't have adequate filters, or we don't have adequate systems that help us to figure out what's really relevant and salient. So can the tools help us do that? And if not identifying which pieces of information are the most important, then possibly which people have got the best trustworthiness, the proven reputations in political areas, which means that if we're in a hurry, these are the people we should tend to listen to more often than others, at least as we start to form our opinions. Then there are also risks here, and we'll be talking about the risks as we go through this session as well. And one of the things that we might do with technology is to stop us from the risks that arise from other aspects of technology. So there's the risks that our political processes, our voting systems, our democratic decisions might be hacked by powerful agents, whether inside the country or outside the country. Can better technology fix that? And another kind of distortion that we're all familiar with is that often the democratic process seems to be governed not just by what people as a whole would want, but there are some vested interests that have a disproportionate influence, whether it's big money, big corporations, or sometimes the existing governments. They all have their own vested interests which seem to derail the normal, ideal democratic process. Could technology help with that? How do we maintain secrecy of ballots to the extent that voters wish this? Is there a risk that if we use online voting, for example, then that might be subverted? And another thing we'd like to do is to get answers reasonably quickly, not necessarily instantaneously, but reasonably quickly without having to wait a long, long time for answers to be worked out. And in that process of working out answers, something that frustrates many people I know is that in certain parts of the world, they only have one vote that counts. And if they would really like to vote for a smaller party or a minority opinion, often they feel unable to do that because they think it'll be a wasted vote. And so they end up with tactical voting, which may have its place, but it frustrates people and the true opinions don't get heard. So these are some areas that we might be talking about shortly as we walk through the session. So I'm now going to ask each of our panelists in turn for their views as briefly, first of all, on the positive vision for what they think we should be focusing on. Instead of trying to solve all these 8 areas and maybe more, let's try and address some of them. So, Stuart, you're in New York. Let's kick things off. Can you introduce yourself and talk about your practical vision for areas of technology improving decision processes? Stuart? Stuart? Don't know if you heard all that.
Yeah, the computer I'm on is having a problem, and I lost. It looks like I lost connectivity. So I'm on my phone now. I'm trying to stabilize.
Technology is helping us at the same time as it's frustrating us. I think that's the story of the day. Do you need more time, or shall we kick off with you?
No, I think it looks okay now. You can see me.
We can see you, yes.
It was before. The sad part is that I can't really see the questions, but I don't really have to because you'll be selecting them, so that's fine.
So just tell the audience a bit about yourself and a bit about your vision for technology improving decision making.
My background is in it's pretty obsessively interdisciplinary. I focus a lot on the current trends in a number of areas, primarily science, but also as it relates to other domains. Specifically, I look at the interactions between different intellectual pursuits, social science, the soft science, as it were, as well as the art and literature. But in terms of politics, I attended last week's for a reason, and the disadvantages of, well, the advantages, it's so mixed for me, but the advantages of, when we say e-voting, by the way, we have to define it. There's online voting, there's e-voting, there's internet voting. E-voting covers a lot of things, but the advantage is that it has the capacity of, it gives us the possibility of two changes in governance. The first is the weak version, in which people no longer have to stand in line all day to vote. They would not be necessarily, at least physically, subject to some of the more offensive practices that we are seeing, such as redistricting, various physical ID presentation requirements, removal of early voting, and those kinds of physical functions, as well as some of the self-interest-based interventions we've seen in voting around the world. The United States, for example, I guess the poster child is what happened in Florida during the Gore elections. Those devices, even though they were using digital voting, were shown to be able to be hacked in less than 15 minutes. So, and reprogrammed in such a way that it would be invisible to the voter. So all of that is an advantage. And I'll get more to the other disadvantages later, but the overriding worry and concern, even in Estonia, for example, is security. On the other hand, the good news is that what most people don't know is that in the state of Texas since 1997, astronauts have been able to vote from the space station in a very completely secure manner that goes through a highly secure protocol through the Johnson Space Center and then on to the voting administration. So, but the main advantage is that it lays the groundwork for a flattening of democracy, for e-democracy. And that's what my main focus is.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to some of the other points shortly, but let's continue this round of introductions. Let's go to David Orban. You're in Italy, David. You're from the Network Society. You're doing lots of other things too. Why don't you introduce yourselves? And I think you may have some slides that you can talk through to share your initial point of view.
Sure, I will be happy to, and thank you very much for having me. I am the CEO of .sub. I'm on the faculty of Singularity University, also an advisor, and I am the founder of Network Society Research. My view is that socio-economic evolution can only happen with a sustainable technological basis. Exponential change is what made us realize our dreams and turn them into the achievements of today. And we have been able to fundamentally shift the environment around us so profoundly as to transform it in a mere eye blink from a geological point of view. However, it is done in an unsustainable manner. And for me, the real question is, are we going to keep using the only difference between what is differentiating us from the dinosaurs? They didn't have telescopes. And unless we keep using the telescopes of reason and science, we will succumb similarly to how they succumbed. From a political point of view, I see the development of ever-changing solutions in a fractal complexity increasing their evolutionary fitness to build resilient societies. And the biggest danger is for the old thinking to keep us back in a hierarchical, centralized system, while today we understand that networks are building distributed and decentralized value systems that go beyond the old geographical boundaries. And this is the fundamental thesis of the network society, that not only widespread social and economic change happens only when a technological foundation makes it sustainable, but that it is what is happening today. We are on the verge of a phase change where the distributed and decentralized technologies outcompete the old ones. And the nation state, in my view, is not going to be able to keep up. So to me, e-democracy and online democracy and politics as it must be conducted in the 21st century is not about adapting the old systems, but about really replacing them. It is about finding new ones that go in place of the old ones instead. And so that is my introduction, and I will be happy to elaborate on any of the points and new ones as we proceed with our conversation today.
Well, that is a very big vision, and it's one that I would really fascinated to discuss. Basically, you're saying that we could tinker and incrementally modify the existing nation-state system of the governance and democracy, but it's not where our focus should be. If we are really visionaries as to the power of technology, we can be creating new systems which are decentralized and distributed. And I will be asking you, what can you point to as good examples of where this is actually working? It sounds very nice in theory, but where is it working in practice? Where can we look to for inspiration of this being here already?
Well, decentralized and distributed systems are already in place in many areas of our economy, and it is really the case that we will keep evolving them further. If I may steal an additional few moments, if you think about energy production, where rather than centralized coal or gas plants or nuclear plants that have a 20-year build-up in the 30-year ROI, photovoltaic systems empower and emancipate anybody by their own individual decisions to become energy independent, and then voluntarily set up smart networks that exchange and balance energy needs as they be. 3D printing in manufacturing fundamentally changes the equation, decoupling the capital invested in production lines from the output, which is only proportional in value to the creativity of the designer. Hydroponics, in-house and urban gardening make agriculture proportional to the volume occupied rather than the area of availability. And even more, they don't depend on pesticides to be kept healthy, but in an enclosed, controlled environment, they are naturally so. personalized health, online learning, cryptocurrencies, chiefly Bitcoin, that cut at the base central banks and the financial lever that they exercise on the sovereign people, and trust networks replacing the security imposed through violence, where the value of participation is far superior than not the capacity of a militarized police force to intervene after the fact. So these are just unstoppable forces as I see them, and the challenge really is not to recognize them, because once you look at them one after the other, it is evident. That the challenge is really, are you going to want to build a society that hinders and tries to slow down this change, or are you stepping up to the challenge of embracing the change and building a society that empowers its participants to take advantage of them?
Well, let's briefly pause that fascinating discussion so we can bring in the final panelist, Andreas, who is active in politics in various ways already. So I'm sure is interested in this future network society too. But why don't you say a few things about yourself, Andreas, so the audience knows about you, and then Sarah, where do you think the vision is for what we should be doing with technology to improve politics?
Hello, thanks for having me. Absolutely, this is a fascinating discussion, and I think for myself it's a particularly interesting topic as it blends most of my personal and professional interests. I've been professionally working in IT infrastructure for the last 15 years, including the fundamentals of the internet security, open source movement, etc. I'm heading a team of infrastructure of online business collaboration platform. For about 20 years, I've been activist in various forms. If I may say, I've been exploring candidates in various elections, including standing for Lithuanian Parliament and recently in the European Parliament elections. I've been also.
Were you standing as an independent or as a member of any party?
I'm not a member of any party. I've been just selecting the most favorite party for myself.
Right.
The most innovative and the most sustainable. I've been very keen on technologies, Pirate Party, Greens, etc. But just want to say I'm not. I've been independent through what was going through party. So I've been also organizer, one of the organizers of the national referendums in Lithuania and campaigning to reduce barriers to legally binding petitions in Lithuania. A number of times I've been in the local commissions ensuring the voting process integrity. I've been for the last 10 years living in London, so I'm originally from Lithuania, and the online technology has been key to my personal transitioning from national politics to remote and multinational information gathering, debating, comparing, decision making, etc. So I certainly agree with the panelists about embracing the change. However, with this IT and political activism experience, I see a challenge that this embracement will be challenging in a way that we need to balance between the two extremes, between being something very old school and going to something radical new, and that comes with those terms as precautionary or proactionary, as we discussed with futurists earlier. And I see a clear danger of some technologies actually being creating a danger, I think, but probably I'll discuss this a bit later. On the positive side, I think the key things which we could be doing now and things that are happening now to improve democracy are the crowdsourcing, like all this Wikinomics movement, from Wikipedia. We can take Uber as the most recent crowdsourcing example, where with the right tools, online tools, flexibility, dynamics, we can create a model where everyone can participate and reduce barriers to the entrance and change, basically, lower the costs of the opportunity, I would say. So as the whole discussion, I think, started with a recent announcement in the UK Parliament about the online voting to be possible in 2020. I just looked at the government main website, gov.uk, and I haven't seen a very modern, slick dashboard of the status of the let's say UK democracy, and ability to join and to participate, raise maybe a problem ticket, a feature ticket, request ticket, which would be found on any other typical online collaboration website. And it goes as simple as that, probably. There are lots of technologies which we could embrace from existing online collaboration communities and just quickly implement. And I'm talking about real-time democracy. With this technology, we can enable immediate information exchange. There's a Parliament TV channel. However, we differently to some, X Factor or other shows, they are not pooling immediate feedback on certain topics. For example, what society thinks in certain subjects. So they could embrace that straight away without any need of the very advanced technologies. And certainly, government could roll out probably projects like meta-governments. I would suggest to look at the www.metagovernment.org site, where about 40 different projects are listed, and there are plenty more, which allow online decision-making specifically for democratic process. And I know that Pirate Party has one of the leading ones called Liquid Democracy, where it's a mix of direct representation and direct democracy and representative democracy. And there is need to research a bit more about how to strike the right balance, because there are obviously risks if there would be just fully blown direct democracy. And I think we could start experimenting on this model. We could start doing that in small organizations first. I know that in UK there are two houses. There's a common House of Commons, which is democratically elected parliament, and there is House of Lords, which is historical sort of house, which has not elected members. And as far as I know, there is a project to convert that house into elected body as well. And I think that we could have this house elected through sort of a new method, new technology, like meta-governments. Like someone suggested to have a list of voters who pass certain exams, for example, or maybe some hybrid system. Multiple different projects should go into a single this second house, which would be a more sophisticated maybe than just equally elected democratic place like the House of Commons, which is already there. So two different mechanisms in democracy could allow to see the differences between them and foster a continuous improvement rather than a one-off change, which is also very embraced in different new technologies. So
can I just double check that URL? Was it metagovernment.org?
Yeah, that's correct. Metagovernment.org. Yeah.
Government.org. So people can look at that. So what I'm hearing in this initial round of discussions is basically the following. I'm hearing that there is certainly scope for incremental improvements, whether by e-voting or by legally binding petitions, making them work a bit more, or possibly by reforming how some of the existing chambers work. It's been discussed for as long as I remember how we might reform the House of Lords here in the UK. There must be similar reforms that might be possible elsewhere. So there's incremental improvements. The other strand, what I heard, is the possibility to do something much more visionary. This is what I particularly heard from David Orban in terms of looking ahead. Rather than just working inside the existing system, look for ways to build a new system which will gradually supplant the existing system. It'll be a much better way in which decisions are made. So that's the second thread. The third thread, which I'm going to ask our panelists to speak about now, and we'll come back to Stuart first and then David and then Andreas, is, and for brief answers if possible, is what are you afraid of when you hear these things? We already heard a little bit about the possibilities of drawback. So is there anything in what you think about the future that makes you afraid of what technology might do to our governments? And then there is one more thread when I'm going to encourage all members of the audience who've been looking into the debate to put your questions online in the Q&A box. So you should be, if you're watching by Google+, and if you have logged into a Google Plus account, if you don't have it logged in, you'll see the questions, but you won't be able to raise a new one. So if you do log in, then you can add a question there to the ones which have already been placed. Thank you to two audience members, Peter Morgan and Valdemar Ingdahl, have already got questions in there. And if you like these questions and you want us to prioritize answering them, then please add a +1. And by default, we'll take the questions which have got the most +1s associated. So, but now let's come to the bad news side of things. What are the risks, if any? So, Stuart, or comment on what you've heard from the other speakers, please. We're not hearing you now, Stuart. Sounds better now? Yeah. No? Not hearing you, Stuart. Maybe you changed your screen orientation. Let's try the settings wheel at the top of the screen. And then you can find out which microphone is working on your system. I think you might have had the audio feed from your other computer last time. No, I'm afraid we're not hearing you, Stuart. Let's whilst you have a chance to look into that, I'll come and ask David the same question.
Oh wait, can you hear me now?
Ah, just in the nick of time. Yes, right.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just one thing I would like to point out is to supplement what Andres had said, is refer people to the following URL. It's on the Facebook page. I posted it there. senatoronline.org.au, where
the Australian example. Yep.
Yeah, it's a very, very good example of an integrated system where citizens and voters play an active role in actually not just being proactive and having electronic voting, but they're actually involved in writing the bills. So it's a heavy involvement. Each citizen has strong input into legislation, but there's still a body of officials that carry out the instantiation or not of that particular measure. So I think it's an interesting model, and I'd like Andres' opinion on it if he has time to check it out. Okay, so my concern is twofold, and this will lead to a question to David, and that is something rather mundane, and that is human nature. My concern is, regardless of the sophistication of the system, what we're seeing is an increasing agglomeration of wealth and power at the higher end of the social hierarchy. And the question has to be, what would make it in their best interest to make this change? In other words, what power does not relinquish itself lightly. History is pretty clear about that. And while David's vision is very compelling, I'm more on Andres' side that it has to be incremental and integrative. But nonetheless, So to David, to reach your vision, what would it take to actually have the interests which are moving in the opposite direction in terms of voter suppression, redistricting in the United States, and other measures, coupled with the still valid excuse of security in online voting, where critiques of online voting often do not completely ignore all of the security issues that are prevalent in almost every election that we've seen, including not just our countries. So that is my concern, human nature, and how would that transition to a more egalitarian, distributed political environment take place?
So you're not hugely concerned about security issues with online voting because you think there are security issues in all voting systems.
Correct. And to add that, I just want to add as well, we're all familiar with the work being done on the next generation hyper-secure internet, which is another aspect of why security may not be as much of a concern as is now being described.
Okay, so let's put some of these questions to David. David, what is your concerns about technology? Are you concerned about human nature getting in the way of us making this transition? Are you concerned about vested interests blocking this improvement, taking away power from them? And are you concerned about the security hacking which might take place?
Yes, absolutely. The issue of established bureaucracies actually resisting this change with the excuse of the precautionary necessities, protecting consumers from making their own decisions because, oh yes, the elected are so much in deciding in the place of the hoi polloi who wouldn't know better, actually are hiding real state of panic. As an illustration, there was a conference organized in London a few months ago that connected and aggregated not the 1% to which unavoidably each of us also belong, otherwise we would not be here out of 7 billion people happily debating how politics should evolve over Google Hangout and Air, but we would be protecting our families, gathering food, and worrying about survival on a day-to-day basis. This conference in London actually connected and aggregated the 1% of the 1%, who directly ask themselves, what can we do out of sheer self-preservation to prevent our wealth from being taken away from us through revolution? Because what is happening is the systems are overreacting, really. Just like an immune system can happily kill you if you don't and must not have a piece of nut according to its own judgment, even if you say, well, what does a nut do anyway? And it is true, it is not the nut killing you, it is your own immune system killing you. What is happening all around is the preservation of vested interests is killing the future. In Hawaii, for an entire year, it was prohibited installing photovoltaic panels because the law required connecting them to the energy grid, and the local utility was unable to absorb the power generated by them. So, of course, no more renewables. Just like 500 years ago, Martin Luther said that the Bible should be translated, now 23andMe gives access to anybody to its own sacred text of the DNA, except that the Federal Drug Administration tells you that you are too stupid, and only the priesthood of doctors is entitled of interpreting the sacred text for you rather than doing it direct. And even if in 2008 the banks have been clearly pinpointed as being one of the reasons for the financial crisis, creating hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars of damages, today the New York authority regulating financial systems is drafting legislation that will impose costs on Bitcoin startups that are higher than those incurred by banks in anti-money laundering and know your customer regulations. So clearly, these are extreme, panicky reactions to this unstoppable change that the systems are seeing. And in my view, what is very important is that it is not possible to stop it, that the billions of people all around the world, and it's not that I don't care about Americans or Europeans, but really what matters is people who live in China, in India, and even more so in Africa. These will be so much more empowered by these new technologies that are directly accessible to them and that allow them to learn immediately without intermediaries and without asking for permission, that this is really what is going to bring dignity to new communities being formed through these technological connections, avoiding the collapse of civilization that otherwise, through old means, could very well come by, not because anybody wants it, but because we are not just smart enough to prevent it. So the dangers that I see are very clear, and they are not coming from technology.
So it sounds like you're agreeing with Stuart there. You're both seeing big possibilities for big change, but also seeing big examples of resistance to the change. And it's not completely clear to me how the positive trends that both of you have pointed out can overcome the negative trends that you've both spoken about. And Stuart, very briefly, I'll let you in to comment before we go to Andreas.
Again, the zeitgeist is an integrated phenomena. It's very difficult to separate and focus on one path and assume that will have necessarily an effect on another. For example, in China, there seems to be this trend that as a particular country moves towards a more sophisticated electronic and web-based environment, depending on the country, and China has shown this, there's a lot of clamping down. What we saw in Hong Kong in terms of political activity and right to determine leadership, which was in the charter that was agreed to initially by Beijing. So I think that yes, it is. They are panicked. I agree with this. They want to maintain control, but I don't think that means that it's inevitable. And I still don't see necessarily a mechanism for intentionally implementing the change that we're discussing. I see that for every action, there's a reaction to be, to use an overused saying, and I think the response will be major, as we've seen in some of the deployment of advanced weaponry that in our own country, the sonic cannons, for example, mounted on tanks at the G9 in Pittsburgh. So I think it's more of a concern, David. I'm sorry.
So let me bring in Andreas here. I've been listening patiently for a while. Andreas, there's quite a few things I'm hoping you'll be able to comment on. First of all, there was the comment earlier by Stuart that says, look, there's nothing new with security issues when we go to e-voting. It's the same as what we're always used to, and so no new concern there. And that's basically also picked up on the question by Julian Snape, who said what are the main security issues with e-voting and how might be overcome. Right. But also I'll let you comment, Andreas, on what you've been hearing in terms of the other panelists.
I didn't.
Certainly, very interesting. Firstly, I'd say that we should go back to some fundamentals of the democracy. There is a saying: democracy is a very bad governance method, but no one invented a better one yet. However, as I mentioned, full direct democracy or full decentralization, total separation from any government, sort of anarchic, fully libertarian way, like Bitcoin, where is illusion that no one governs. That means no one can control. It can create a society of called ochlocracy, where is mob ruling. So we always need to balance between the very strict control of the government and centralization, and very radical decentralization where there's no control and pretty much, something anarchy. So obviously there are different preferences, personal, and I fully respect. However, I would be more a pro-balanced method, which I think in a society we are constantly battling, and this is going to be, I think, a constant battle. So then I understand that too much changes, too dynamic using technologies, too dynamic changes can create some volatility, and we need to think of certain safeguards around that. When it comes about voting, Stalin from Russia once said that it doesn't matter what decisions are made or how voting happened. It's important who is managing the decision-making system or who is counting the votes. And I've been researching this subject for nearly 10 years now, and we've been campaigning strongly in Lithuania against voting with a number of computer specialists. Because Lithuania is a neighbor country to Estonia, which is the only country in the world which has online voting, not to be mixed with e-voting. Internet voting or online voting is the one which you do from any place in the world over internet, and e-voting is any electronic use in the voting process, like scanners or some touch screen machines which allow you to vote in certain places. So online voting means that the perimeter in which the voting is happening is global, fully on all the networks in the world, accessible from all the places. It means totally uncontrollable network, and from my nearly 10 years research and experience in working in online collaboration systems with the security, with IT, I strongly feel that it's impossible to combine two fundamentally opposite things, oxymoronic things, as it says, fully private, anonymous opinion when putting your candidates, and fully secure, auditable, verifiable system. These are two opposites which are not really possible in an online world. This has been confirmed by security experts from IBM, from Bruce Schneier as a known cryptographer, from professors in Oxford University of Security and Cambridge and some other universities in US. I've been yesterday to the Cambridge Computer Science Department and had the opportunity to talk with some of the guys, professors and PhDs, about the online voting, and then they all also expressed the concerns. And it's just, as Pirate Party creator said in one of the articles you can Google, at least it said that if you want decisions to be made by 4chan, it's a known hackers community online. If you want decisions made by 4chan kids in the political system, then you can accept online voting. Otherwise, classical voting system is broken in a ways we know. And I've been in electoral commissions myself a number of times, and I know that certainly most of the issues, if there are some issues, can be resolved much easier than any other online voting issues. And it comes, I find this topic particularly interesting because it blends with the futurism, I think, and the overall knowledge management system like Google, like artificial intelligence, which means that very complex computing, online, self-aware systems will be doing lots of clever things. And as centralized government, so is very centralized knowledge companies, corporations like Google, like Microsoft, who has a very strong dominant positions in controlling lots and lots of information. And as we go forwards, we need to have some very basic principles, as in any computing platform you would be building. You need something very simple to ensure security and overall running of that system. And if it's complex, that means that no one is able to have any trust in the foundations of the system. And that would mean, for if that comes, if it would come back to the online voting, that means that only very few people would be able to understand how it works, and those, even the few people, would not be able to have 100% trust in the system, or not trust, but understanding. I'd like to just refer back to this century's main, very known cryptography and first computer challenge in the World War, the Enigma machine. And Germans thought that they had a perfect system of encryption and security, and British obviously cracked it, but they haven't disclosed it, and they were sacrificing ships and other military resources until certain points, until they knew that that is the game-changing moment. And that the same applies to online voting. Some bad guys might be affecting and incrementally tweaking system, and we will not know it until it will be too late, probably. And when it comes to AI and runaway AI, etc., it will become really complicated, and I think life-threatening issues in the future. And if the guys from talking about AI security, I think we need to mix into this overall online political decision-making security framework and be careful. I think because in the end, if we are aiming for very much improved overall life and systems, and if something will go really wrong, the whole meaning of what we are aiming for will be lost. Therefore, a balance.
One word question answer from you on well, what about Estonia? Estonia seemed to have put in place exactly the kind of systems that you were saying are dangerous. Do you think the Estonians are therefore foolish to do such a thing? Are they going to regret what they have done?
I take example with unlocked doors in your house. So basically, I can leave my house unlocked for a day, 2, 3, or might not be locking at all. I don't think anyone checks if my door in the house is locked for quite a while. But then, is that risk worth that outcome? What they are getting? So I think, and there been confirmation by Open Rights Group in UK and certain professors, as I mentioned, in the security field and encryption field, that is very risky, and they're just experimenting in a very nice way. Obviously, it's very nice to see them happily taking this aventure, sort of. But I'm sure, as in any systems in the world, if you see big corporations, military, government, NASA, the Pentagon, etc., all those systems are hacked at some point. The only difference is that those systems are not anonymous, like banks. We have a verification method. We can see the balance. We know what's stolen. We know what's leaked, etc., etc. However, in the voting, when it's anonymous, we can't even verify. There is no ways to make sure it's secure and private at the same time. If voting wouldn't be anonymous, then it would be a totally different matter. However, in UK, the voting was not anonymous originally, and then about 130 years ago, I think, there was a
secret ballot.
A secret ballot act, which, as the same way in Australia and other places, which made voting mandatory secret, because there would be a coercion of family members, of the business, of the other finance and other organizations, which would make large groups of people vote in a certain ways. So unfortunately, this thing hasn't changed yet, as I understand. Therefore, privacy and huge security are absolute requirements. And the only way is really to do the classical way, the very basic way, which is understood by majority of people. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible with online voting.
So thanks, Andreas. That's a very clear summary there. I'm going to feed in a couple of questions now that have been upvoted, and they're both questions about alternative things to do. If e-voting is challenging, should we be focusing our attention on a couple of other things? So Yisar, Leah Israeli, has suggested, well, shouldn't we be focusing on greater transparency in politics? Isn't that what the technology can give us? So that instead of lots of decisions being taken place obscurely, then more things are transparent. And another suggestion by Valdemar Ingdahl is that we should be focusing not on e-democracy, perhaps, but on e-administration, which means that the actual practice of government, the execution of tasks, should be made much more effective and efficient by applying technology. Maybe that's a more reasonable aspiration than dangling with the democracy. I'm going to ask all three panelists, starting with David and then Stuart and then Andreas, to briefly address either of these questions or any other thing that's top of your mind just now. So, David.
I think we should tackle the sacredness of voting and democracy head on and just do away with the concept. First of all, politicians are not a different class of human being. Politicians are as fallible and maybe even more so, because just like drug addicts are dependent on the daily dose, and alcoholics are dependent on getting a hold of their wine or beer bottle, politicians are certain addicts selected for their dependency on money and power. So I think that what we are already seeing of certain voting mechanisms being delegated to systems that are reliably giving us choices that we appreciate is very positive. A simple example of these systems are auto-matching playlists for our next song in our music player. We do not consciously want to be beholden to decide what the next song is. We very happily delegate the decision to these automated systems. And the chore of being actually informed and understanding of what certain decisions entail go beyond what the desire of most individuals is. So absolutely, we have to conduct democracy openly, but we don't have to believe that as we do it today, as we do politics and democracy today, is the best way.
Stuart.
Okay, some diverse responses. One, I just want to point out to Andreas's very well thought out and presented analysis of security. Two things, and also to your question, David Wood. What happened in Estonia has been subject to significant forensic post-event analysis, and there were significant security issues. And I have that PDF, which I'll be happy to send to you, David, to circulate to the group after the event. But in terms of technology, there is something that is not well known because it's relatively early on, but researchers in Vienna a few years ago devised entanglement-bank communications called blind quantum computing. This is a protocol that does not require an encryption key because the quantum computers involved in the communication are not aware that anything is transpiring. And I'm not talking about awareness in terms of artificial intelligence. In other words, there is no signal that the systems can recognize that indicate that a communication is taking place, and because of the way it's structured, there is no encryption required. So it's completely secure. because the communication is blind, and in essence means there's nothing to hack into. It's fascinating, and I can send that paper as well. But one thing that I would like to mention is that we haven't touched on, and I think this is rather important. No, and by the way, two things. One, there is, to Andreas's point of, again, integration, blackboxvoting.org, that was active in dissecting and analyzing the Florida problem in 2000 and 2004, has put forth something which is interesting, which is where, because of the concerns over e-voting for the general voter, they're saying that what's needed and required at this point in our technological history is e-voting disclosure of our legislators. Their vote is, we are entitled to know that vote. They are required to disclose it because of the complexity of other provisions being attached to bills. It's very difficult to see how someone really voted and why they voted that way.
So you're asking for more transparency, as indeed the question from Isaac was.
One of the questions spoke to, also on Facebook, a very, very robust but user-friendly way of accessing the complete voting history of any of our legislators in any country, and coupling that with a robust analysis that's available on different websites in isolation from one another of what they've promised, what their statements are, and how they reflect their actual vote, coupled again with the sources of their campaign financing. This is what's required, and the difficulty in all of that is my final point, in that for all of this to work, the population has to be well educated and interested in being informed at this level of what their government is actually doing. And we see in this country, because of the economic environment, literally most people don't have time, even if they're interested. People are working 2 or 3 jobs and they're citizens and they're voting, and yet they don't have the time to get the degree of information acquisition that they need to be an informed voter in this next generation voting environment. And that hasn't been talked about yet, the absolute need for robust education and disassembly of propaganda, as was stated in one of the comments earlier before the event started, propaganda from actual factual representation of what the government is doing in terms of legislation and legislator behavior.
Andreas, what would you see as the priorities, if not e-voting? So you made a case that we shouldn't be doing that. Do you support arguments for greater transparency? Do you support the arguments for maybe focusing on just being more effective in how we are executing? Possibly more focus on making online petitions work and give more information to politicians about what the government, what the population as a whole is thinking? Or what would you put your preference onto doing?
I would agree with this, Stuart, on the education matter. Absolutely. There's a saying, if you don't have time to be interested in politics, you'll be governed by those who have time to be interested in politics, basically. And online voting doesn't give any quality, really, to the political system or democracy. It just allows you to do something like fast food. That means just get something, just get satisfied, and just not worry about any consequences and what is happening. Voting in itself, or clicking a button, or going to a polling station in your street, basically, is so quick that it is only a really, really small percentage of overall time which needs to understand anything about what is happening there and to have opinion. Not that extensively informed, there's at least opinion about what is happening there. And yeah, the question about rather we should be focusing on other e-tools rather than the online voting tools. I think that is the question, because e-democracy and e-administration probably are the same things rather than e-voting or i-voting of on internet voting. It's absolutely, absolutely. I think that if someone or politicians or anyone wants to make a real change, we definitely must focus on all those services which doesn't have any risk of creating any damage or creating lower quality democracy. And that means transparency, giving all the open data, allowing to integrate dashboards of the monitoring of the nation like you do with any other IT systems. We have a dashboard, alerts of warnings of what is going wrong in a real time, so that it's not about after 4 years, we look again what's been happening, who has been lying, and we vote again for them because we just believe something will change. We should be allowing basically to record, simple thing as that, like allowing to record what politicians are saying and take it as a legally binding thing. If we go to online shop and we buy something and we get something totally else, we would be going to the court and saying, we've been missold something. With politicians, we don't do somehow that. They are selling us anything and we are paying them with our votes, and they deliver something totally else, and we can't do anything about that. So with meta-government type projects, we should be able to have a much more dynamic delegation system and withdraw our delegation much quicker. As I said, we need certain safeguards to make sure it's not too dynamic and we can have stability in the overall system. But if we can manage dynamics of that, I think that would give us a real change, politicians which we can believe in, and then there would be candidates, I think, which would believe in the system overall and would put themselves forward, and we would be able to do stuff. So transparency, giving all the data, combining, allowing, as any other online collaboration site, to crowdsource solutions, crowdsource problems, innovation, changes, allow and support startups in democracy improvement. The startups culture in technology world, in IT world especially, is thriving everywhere now, and that is seen as a key way of improving things, innovating things. Therefore, I think encouraging startups in democracy, I think, should also be a very important way forwards, which would then create many more tools and transparency and so on.
Startups mentality in democracy. Fascinating. Well, we're almost out of time. In fact, we've gone slightly over the hour already, but I think we should to try and squeeze a couple of more questions in, because there are so many fascinating threads that we haven't quite finished yet. But I will ask everybody to comment on one of a couple of questions that have been raised. The question by Peter Morgan, which he posed to David Organ, that I think all three of you may be interested to answer, is pulling everything together that you've heard, pulling everything together that you've been thinking about. What do you actually think is credible to happen in the next 5 years in terms of improved decision-making in politics? And if you're bold, what do you think might be happening in the next 10 years in practical terms? Bearing in mind, and here's where I'm going to feed in the second question, this is a question from Julian Snape, who says, look, if we have more democracy, it's going to make conventional politicians redundant to an extent. They're meant to be representing us, but if we are able to represent ourselves without their need, they may not like it very much. They're going to be very resistant to moving in that direction. So that might be a big spanner in the progress towards what we're looking to. So these are a couple of questions, and I'll ask each of you to be relatively quick in answering so we can get one more final set of comments from each of you. So let's go to David, then Stuart, then Andreas on these.
I see, as William Gibson said, the future already being here, just not evenly distributed yet. The political systems have never been defined by moral decisions, but actually by the average energy availability per head. And as photovoltaic systems are going to radically increase if we allow them to energy availability in every possible country, but very importantly in Africa, India, China, people will be empowered to create novel systems where the very foundations of the social contract are going to be rediscussed. What it means to have to work in order to sustain oneself, what it means to impose through taxation or through other means the violence of corruption on one group on the other. And to me, the answers for the next 5 years are going to be extremely confused, sometimes also violent. And wherever there is violence, we really have to ask ourselves who benefits. Just like from the current series of violent acts that are being depicted in the Western media from ISIS, how is it possible that ISIS gets hold of an entire stretch of land where supposedly the US has been able to disband powerful armies and regimes? These are questions that are not being asked. So if they are not, that is also very important and I think very significant. At the end, after the next 5, 10, or maybe even 15 years, I do think that we will realize how systems that are capable of analyzing the deep interconnectedness of our various living systems, ecological, economical, and social, we will be able to derive new balances of how to delegate decision-making, not on a 4-year rhythm, but on an hourly rhythm, adjusting at a fine grain, at a fine granularity, what is needed to evolve styles of life that are fruitful for all the members of the societies to live.
So the changes that technology will bring about, they're not just that in terms of improved democratic decision tools. It is, as you said, that there will be better energy supplies everywhere. More and more people will have a much more empowerment. The education systems will mean that more and more people know what's possible. And as a result, in part of that, a new energy in the sense of vitality and creativity, that is going to lead to stronger and stronger pressure and stronger resources for democratic change as well. So that is a very interesting take on things. Stuart.
Yeah. Okay, very quickly then. I just want to harken back to one of the first things I said, which is the relationship between the hierarchical distribution, uneven distribution, not just of political power, but of wealth. Capitalism is a key player in this. What reminded me to repeat that was when Andrea said that we pay our legislators with our votes. Yes, but our taxes also pay their salaries. And that's one of the key reasons to me that full disclosure is so necessary, because, again, if people could be interested enough or encouraged to be interested enough to find out, and the tools are provided to make it easy for them to find out, more people need, I'm speaking for the United States where it's so prevalent now, need to be interested enough to become aware that the people they voted into office are legislating against those voters' interests. So this is critical in motivating a population to put more pressure on its representative government, as Andreas was talking about it in a similar way. Because otherwise, there's really no intrinsic reason for technology to change this. Technology in and of itself is neutral. Anything that the population at large can use to its advantage, so can governments who are interested in maintaining the power differential. So I think, again, it comes down to education. In terms of some of the other things that were mentioned, I do want to say that I never said that I'm not concerned about security. I'm just saying that there are solutions. For example, addressing the capitalist issue, and this will be it in terms of technology. One thing that there are a couple of technologies that have the possibility of ushering in a post-scarcity economy that would address what David was speaking about in terms of not having to really work in order to maintain one's well-being. But again, considering capitalist interests to keep that from happening, there's nuclear fusion, which has been coming for 5 years for the past 40 years. There are government documents acknowledging that it's at least 50% a political issue, that research hasn't been accelerated. But there's also the promise of the next or several generations down the road of 3D printing, which would be something like Drexler's vision of nanofabrication. So yes, technologies hold this promise in political and human levels. But the question is how we can do an end run around the way their development and deployment are controlled when that deployment would reduce the perceived power and the support of governments over the population.
Thanks, Stuart. Andreas, what's your vision for what you think will be happening in the next 5 or 10 years? And do you think existing politicians, or indeed existing capitalist large corporations, are going to resist these changes?
Thomas Jefferson said that every generation needs a new revolution. And it's true that every 21, 25 years, some paradigm changes a little bit in the society. However, things, especially with the technology these days, are changing so rapidly and so fast. It might be so much faster, and it might be so much stealthier what is happening. I think generally that new generation hasn't embraced democracy or political things. They are going, I think, other way. I think they're going away from that. They're going more around democracy rather than going and embracing, changing in good ways. And I think that's a shame. And I think there is a risk that, big governments, some governments like, you can see in China, which are very centralized and very engineering type approach, like big corporations like Google and Microsoft. On the other hand, they have lots of data, and they are not democratic at all in decision making or creating this artificial intelligence with 80% of the world's AI companies they bought recently, and with Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, etc., saying that within 5 to 10 years there might be a runaway AI, which is sensationalist, really, and quite real, having in mind how racing different governments and large corporations in the world are to creating that, because the first one who will create that might take it all, and so on. So there are questions. I think all these things are very much related, and there's a real challenging to our existence. I strongly believe, alongside those noble people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk and everyone else warning us about those risks. And of course, there is resistance, and there's two-sided resistance. I think we can see crowdsourced taxi company Uber, and lots of taxists not happy about this change. It's a good thing at one side. On the other hand, they have certain points that it's not that safe, it's not that certified, etc., etc. So again, I'm looking at innovative and progressive change. However, not blind change, careful, and being looking from all sides and being in control on the process rather than process being in control over us. And if we will not be interested at this point in the politics and the power games and what is happening with artificial intelligence in Google Labs and what resources are thrown there, obviously, AI will take over, and there'll be no worries pretty much for us. We'll be done. So I think we need to be careful and develop, like Elon Musk gave this, I think, few $1 million to this fund about researching aspects of the AI security. The similar way I think we should be putting towards making any other systems and improvements of the democratic system to be safe and secure as a main thing.
So what I'm hearing is that there are I'm hearing from all three of you, in fact, that there are lots of possible developments in the next 5 or 10 years, but it's not at all clear which of these scenarios will unfold. But there is one message through all of this, which I'm hearing, is that we should be thinking hard about it. We should be researching these possibilities rather than researching the present day and the issues within present day politics, which many people are looking at. We must get more people looking at these future questions. And that although we don't have a very clear, unambiguous set of answers today, that just shows that the field is relatively untrodden and we need to be treading it a lot more. Just time for final remarks from all three of you. There are some questions that haven't been looked at all from the audience. If one of them is particularly important to you, then comment on it. But more generally, I'm looking. Let's go to Stuart and then Andreas and then final words from David. What would you most want the audience to take away from this discussion? So, Stuart, final words.
Okay. All right. So just a quick response once again. I'm not saying, again, when I make these comments, I'm not saying that technology is the solution. I'm saying that technology provides a tool that can be part of a solution. That's perhaps a bit.
That's fine. I think that's entirely right.
That's important. So, okay, very quickly. So in terms of Uber, for example, they're having a lot of problems. They've recently been disallowed in a couple of countries in Europe. Because of some of the reports of the behavior of the drivers, but they're also working on driverless cars, just like Google has deployed driverless taxis in Las Vegas for a couple of years already. So when that happens, then it obviates the problems they're having because the drivers are not there to cause worry. So there's always going to be this dialectic as different aspects of society juggle in its forward motion. I would say that therefore the main thing to be focused on is not to be focused on any one thing. That it's necessary to keep an interdisciplinary and multiple facets in mind when considering how we move to the future. Not just the technology, not just the politics, not just the sociological or sociocultural network, but how they interact, because at its heart, it's all human behavior.
I think that's a very good message to take away. And Andreas, what would your final comments be? You agreeing that there's a question of integration, that pulling together multiple insights, or do you think is there something that's clear enough that it deserves its focus and attention in its own right? Andreas?
Well, I think, I think we need to. My main message is just to innovate, just and be careful when innovating. There are lots of opportunities, and there will be a lot of changes in our generation, and that's why it's very, very interesting to be around them. And certainly, it's important to innovate further.
So the solution will come out of taking a broad perspective and then figuring out the innovative solutions rather than just reiterating what we've heard already. David.
As a universal Darwinist, I must say that things do not always stay the same. Unicellular organisms giving rise through the Cambrian explosion to the variety of life we see among us today. And today we are on the threshold of a uniquely self-aware intellect being together potentially of millions and billions of others. We should cherish that. We should be aware of that potentially coming. And unless we proactively anticipate and we proactively plan for this change, we will be swept aside by it for sure. However, exactly because we are capable of this introspection, we are capable of this self-awareness, the future is in our hand. We can chart it. And our political systems, our regulatory systems are a fundamentally important tool in order for fruitful futures to be built. And it is up to us, We don't even know whether 7 billion minds are enough. We cannot waste any. Bringing everybody to participate, everybody to realize how important the current time is, not only for our planet, but potentially for the future of the universe, is our greatest challenge and greatest opportunity today.
Many thanks, David. So if people have been listening to this discussion, and if anybody thinks that they have got a clear understanding and a clear analysis of some of these points, then consider making a submission for the book that Transpolitica is pulling together. The deadline for submitting a complete chapter for publication in this book is the end of February, which is about 3 weeks away. So there isn't much time to actually write a new chapter, but I know some people are extremely creative indeed, and you can maybe use some of the information you have already written. There are a number of chapters that are being written which address some of these questions that we have been discussing, such as how should we manage the risks of AGI, and how do we cope in general with the acceleration of politics given the acceleration of technology. But if anybody thinks that they can chip in with something that's new and important, it doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be fully referenced. We are looking at just something that advances the discussion, then please let us know and we may consider it for inclusion. Thanks to everybody for taking part in this discussion. We will see a lot more discussion on this because we are a long way from being at the end of the road, but it is clear we're going to need to pull together insights from many disciplines, and it's clear also we're going to need to let some of the innovative mentality, the innovative culture of startups to have a fair crack at devising new solutions, because sticking with the old solutions is not going to be able to cope with the changes ahead. Thanks to everybody, and I look forward to seeing you in a future on-air event which will be announced shortly. Goodbye.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Pleasure. Bye.
Bye.